If I could have your attention, I'd like to call the proposed zoning ordinance amendment, number 2330, special meeting to order, and request that Secretary Felix assist me in the calling of the roll.
Okay. Mr. Fuentes?
Here.
Mrs. Funk? Mrs. Greenholt?
Here.
Mr. Greenholt?
Here.
Mr. Hegberg? Mr. Kress?
Here.
Mr. Lockard? Mr. Reichart?
Here.
Mr. Rowland?
Here.
Dr. Rupp?
Here.
Solicitor Schultes?
Here.
Administrator Hill? Mayor Whitman?
Here.
Secretary Felix? We have a quorum.
Thank you. Please note that tonight is the time set for Hanover Borough Council to hold a public hearing to obtain comment from the public and to discuss the text and map of the proposed new zoning ordinance amendment of the Borough of Hanover, proposed ordinance number 2330. At this point, I will turn the meeting over to our solicitor to moderate tonight's public hearing.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tim Schultes. I am the solicitor to Hanover Borough. I will be facilitating tonight's hearing. In addition to council members and staff participation, we'll provide an opportunity for verbal comment following the presentation of Director Maines and our planner, Sean Rairigh. On August 19, 2022, a copy of the proposed zoning ordinance amendment, ordinance number 2330, was sent to the York County Planning Commission for its review. We received correspondence from the York County Planning Commission that they will not be able to review the proposed zoning ordinance amendment until its meeting on October 18, 2022. On August 22, 2022, a copy of the proposed ordinance amendment was sent to the neighboring municipalities for their review and comment. On September 1 and September 8, 2022, the legal notice and the intention to adopt was published in the Hanover Evening Sun. On August 26, 2022, written notices listing the location, date, and time of hearing were mailed by first-class mail to all of the properties located within the area being rezoned as listed in Exhibit A of the proposed zoning ordinance amendment, and to the addresses to which tax bills are sent as evidenced by the tax records within the possession of the borough. On August 29, 2022, an attested copy of the proposed zoning ordinance was sent to the York County Court Administration for filing in the County Law Library or other county office designated by the York County Commissioners. While this zoning ordinance amendment was prepared by the Hanover Borough Planning Commission by letter dated September 7, 2022, the Hanover Borough Planning Commission did take action to recommend that council adopt the proposed zoning ordinance amendment. On September 19, 20, and 21, each property affected by the map changes were posted at points deemed sufficient by the borough to notify all potentially interested citizens. Now, as advertised, the proposed ordinance contains an Exhibit A, which is the proposed revised official zoning map of the borough, as well as a listing of all of the properties affected by the zoning map change. In the course of the public notice process, it was determined that there was an error in the listing of the properties contained in Exhibit A. 7 properties were misidentified in terms of the proposed new zoning district, which was changing from M to R5. Those properties are 263 3rd Street, Building 1 and 2, 261 3rd Street, 257-259 3rd Street, 255 3rd Street, 251-253 3rd Street, 249 3rd Street, and 249 3rd Street rear. As to these 7 properties, revised written notices were mailed by first-class mail on September 2, 2022. 15 properties were listed within Exhibit A, changing the zoning districts when in fact They are not changing zoning districts. These properties are 825 Broadway, 821 Broadway, 819 Broadway, 815 Broadway, 805 Broadway, 803 Broadway, 918 Broadway, 914 Broadway, 904 Broadway, 822 Broadway, 818 Broadway, 806 Broadway, 460 Grant Drive, 800 Broadway, and 795 Cherry Tree Court. As to these 15 properties, revised written notices were mailed by first-class mail on September 6, 2022, to 14 properties, but not to 795 Cherry Tree Court, because the original letter addressed to 795 Cherry Tree Court, dated August 26, was returned to the borough by the post office. Because the borough will have to substantially revise the proposed zoning ordinance amendment, specifically the list of the properties in Exhibit A, the borough will need to have another public hearing pursuant to public notice, mailed notice, and electronic notice, if applicable, before proceeding to vote on the amendment. Additionally, the borough will have to re-advertise its notice of proposed enactment, setting forth all of the detail together with a summary of the amendments. We will address these procedural matters further down on the agenda. And I'll hand it back to the president.
At this time, I guess we're going to open up for public comment. If you have something to, oh, sorry. I jumped the gun. I jumped over our comment by our engineer, Mr. Maines. All right.
Real briefly, and I'll just stand here so everybody can hear me. So my name's Eric Maines. I'm the Director of Planning and Engineering for the borough. When the borough adopted the new zoning ordinance in June of last year, one of the statements I made to you was that I would be coming back to you asking within a year's time for some amendments. And that was not through any fault or errors or things like that. That's just the natural course of a zoning ordinance. You need to keep your zoning ordinance in line with what your residents are doing with properties and with land use trends. Also, as Sean Rairigh, our planner, will tell you later in his presentation, we did receive various feedback from some individuals who live in the community, as well as some outside entities such as the York County Planning Commission and other agencies who advised us of some new trends and things that we needed to make sure our zoning ordinance accounted for. So I'm going to turn it over to Sean. He's got a couple slides here, about less than a half a dozen of those, just in the interest of time, just to kind of give you a broad sweep at how we got to this point, and then certainly we'll go from there.
Thanks, Eric. Thank you for having me here tonight. Like you mentioned, I've got a few slides just to kind of go over, but to introduce myself, Sean Rairigh, I work for Gannett Fleming. I'm a planner there. I've been with Gannett Fleming for over 10 years. I have 20 years of experience in planning consulting, and for a brief time, for about 5 years, I lived in New England where I was a town planner on the public side of things. As a zoning enforcement officer, and also writing some zoning for some of the towns I worked with up there. So just, I wanted to give an overview of the process. As Eric mentioned, you all passed your zoning ordinance last year, and then since then, staff has been keeping a tally of things that have come up, items, subject matters, things like that have come up, and also the Planning Commission members themselves have noticed things around town that they wanted corrected. So this was really staff and Planning Commission led, this process. A lot of it was based on feedback we received from outside parties, as you mentioned, York County being one of them, also individual, landowners, businesses, things like that, and as well as experiences, new developments that have come through that have been, maybe not as welcomed, and we find fault with the zoning ordinance, so we want to correct those. Process began in December, went all the way through August of this year. Planning Commission meetings are always open to the public, and that's where they were held. Commission always welcomed public comment, and we did receive public comment at these meetings too. And a lot of that comment was taken into what we've produced. So if you go to the next slide. So just to also iterate, the larger kind of goals of the zoning ordinance that you passed last year, but also the amendments that we're proposing now, is to further the comprehensive plan from 2015, to make sure the zoning is in line with all the goals from that plan. We also want to make sure your zoning is in line with all applicable federal law, state law, things like that, and I can get into specifics of that in a little bit. And since you've also, you're creating a new saldo, you've created other new ordinances, another zoning amendment that was passed last year, we wanted to make sure that the zoning ordinance itself reflected that, incorporated all those things in there too. And then like I said, just improving the regulations as a matter of course as you go through zoning, and improving the outcomes of development and land use. So to get, an overview of what we did, if you don't mind, next slide. These edits really came from a variety of sources and produced a variety of things. So, like I said, one thing was to incorporate amendments that have passed since your last zoning ordinance. The short-term rental amendment was passed last year, or earlier this year, if I believe correctly. So we wanted to make sure that was put into place in the ordinance. York County Planning Commission reviewed the ordinance last year when it was passed in 2021 and had a number of comments. Some were just minor revisions, this word is spelled wrong, that kind of thing. Some were asking us, the more substantive ones were asking us to make sure we were aligned with the Fair Housing Act, and make sure that we were aligned with newer Pennsylvania laws concerning medical marijuana facilities, things like that, to make sure we were up to date with that so we could be, current with those laws. And so we changed things like, to adjust to the Fair Housing Act, things like where group homes are allowed, to make sure we're in accordance with that. And like I said, the medical marijuana facilities too, to make sure that we're in accordance with state law there. We had a number of map requests come in. Just to reiterate, the process that produced the zoning ordinance that you adopted last year, I didn't begin. I know you had a consultant team working as a joint resolution with Penn Township, and they had produced a zoning map. When I came into the process, we were kind of focused on making sure the commercial districts were done right, so that's where our main focus was. So the outlying districts, I didn't want to go through the public process again that the previous consultant had already completed. So we largely kept those districts intact. Then you go forward with this ordinance, you realize, wait a minute, this district down here in the southwest doesn't really reflect the lot size, housing types, things like that that are actually there, so let's change that. We found places where there were commercial uses in residential districts, and there were enough of them, we said, why don't we extend the mixed-use district to gather those commercial uses, make sure that those are legal, legally allowed to expand, continue, et cetera. So most of the map changes reflect those kind of little small changes to reflect existing on-the-ground conditions that we wanted to see. And there was one case of a split parcel too, which we always try to avoid in zoning, is splitting a parcel in half between two different districts because it makes for bad development. So next slide. And then finally, we wanted to correct or prevent negative impacts with development. So we adjusted some of the densities, particularly in the mixed-use district, to make sure that there are density controls where there were none before. We adjusted parking regulations, again, particularly in the mixed-use district, to make sure that any development that's happening in those districts was providing parking on site for residential uses. We created controls for single-family conversions, which is a trend in your town where you take these larger homes and sometimes even smaller homes, and they're being converted from single-family uses into two or more family uses. So we wanted to make sure that if that happens, it's with certain regulations that only, that we establish regulations to guide that effort and make sure it's happening in a place where it's not going to affect neighbors. Also, there were interpretation edits looking for, clarifications, things like that to spell out exactly what we're looking for. So accessory dwelling units is a hot topic that was included in your zoning ordinance. We wanted to make sure it's spelled out where we intend these to be, and that's these are intended to be relations. So you have an adult child who's moving back or an elderly parent that you want to take care of in a separate unit within your house or outside of your house. It's not to create additional rental income. It's not to create additional rental units for any use. So we made sure to spell that out. We attached some regulations to make sure those uses fit in well. Things like spelling out that coverage means it's building coverage, not other kind of coverage. We corrected the pools regulations to make sure that some of the older things that were in the previous zoning ordinance were incorporated into this ordinance, correcting things like where satellite dishes have to be placed on houses, how many are allowed, things like that. So lots of small little things that were already in your ordinance, but we wanted to make sure they're spelled out, to everyone's satisfaction and clarity. And then finally, there were a number of new topics that came up for discussion that Planning Commission or public had brought to us. So we've incorporated new impervious surface controls to limit how much impervious surface is done for new developments. We've incorporated new traffic study standards for developments so that they'll have rules to follow when producing traffic studies. We've included a number of new uses that weren't listed in your zoning before, things like convention centers. We've separated hotels and motels. We included uses such as domestic abuse shelters, things like that, that weren't listed before. And then, of course, found places for them to go and attached regulations if we needed to for those particular uses. And then finally, a new topic was to encourage redevelopment for some of the older commercial uses in your planned development district. This is a district on the north side of town that includes some of the big shopping centers that you see that are fairly new, but it also includes some of the older shopping centers and things that you could predict in the next 10, 20 years might come up under redevelopment pressure. So we wanted to make sure that while allowing that, we wanted the uses we wanted to see there and the kinds of development that the Planning Commission was aiming for. So that's kind of the gist of everything we've done in a broad overview. I'll be happy to entertain any specific questions if you have any, or if, as needed in this hearing or the next hearing. But overall, as Eric mentioned, we always try to keep zoning fresh and live, always adapting to new uses, always adapting to make sure it's current with policies, and producing what you want to see. So, thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I believe I'm going to open it up to individual questions for those present physically. If you have something to state or question for the record, please come forward, identify yourself by name, address, and we'll hear what you have to say at this time. If you could just raise your hand and we'll try and do it orderly if you do have a comment or question. Is there anyone online following this one? Okay. I ask, are there any questions of council, specifically starting to the right, working my way to the middle,
There's a hand back.
working my way this way?
There's one person.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I'm Terry Kramer.
Come forward so the stenographer can hear you and we can hear you as well.
Can you spell your last name,
Terry
please?
Kramer. I live at 729 Spruce Drive.
Can you spell your last name, please?
Cromer.
Thank you.
And I was just wondering if there's a map of the proposed changes for
1 second, sir.
Your address?
729 Spruce Drive. Sorry. Okay. I was just wondering if there was okay. I was
Did you
just
remember
wondering if
what
there
you-
was a map of the proposed change that they're gonna do behind that cherry tree that shows what they have proposed to the,
We're going to direct that to Mr. Maines. Do you understand this question?
So let me just separate the two. So there is a zoning hearing that will be coming up in October for the project that I believe you're referencing.
Right.
This particular effort tonight, this zoning hearing, is not focused on specifically on a project. So there isn't anything in the purview of this discussion related to that other than changes of the land zoning for it. But your specific questions about a project on that property would be the zoning hearing board. That's the third Monday in October.
all right.
And then they'll put on a presentation, I believe, and certainly you'll be able to attend and ask questions.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Good evening. Paul Minnick, M-I-N-N-I-C-H, with an address of 100 East Market Street, York, PA 17401. Good evening. I represent J. Myers Building and Development and Royal Building, Inc. And just wanted to put of record, our company owns Cherry Tree Court, the Cherry Tree Development, and we were given notice of the zoning change classification from your R5 district to your R1 district. Had a couple concerns relative to that. From a timing standpoint, we were in the midst of submitting plans for garden apartments at that time. The issue came up, and fortunately, Myers was in a unique position, and we were able to get our plan submitted timely before the ordinance change took effect. So we were able to protect our rights, but Myers was a little bit uniquely positioned to be able to get a submittal in about 24 hours before the timing changed. And I would note, it's very difficult for property owners who essentially do rely to some degree on their zoning classification. I think Mr. Maines is correct. There are certainly observations that any new zoning ordinance would need to be fine-tuned or adjusted based on practical realities or changes. But we did find the changes, there are quite a bit of changes, quite a few property owners who are impacted. And it's obviously problematic if you have particular plans either in mind or in process, and then you're suddenly subject to a zoning change, and that's precisely what happened with us. We were before the Planning Commission and really had no idea that we were going to be subject to a change. So just wanted to point out that concern. And then also, we were subject to a potential zoning classification change from the R5 to the R1 district. And we certainly understand that there, again, may be some reasons for some fine tuning or some changes, but this would, if we hadn't gotten our plans in time, would have impacted substantially our ability to put in rental units. And I know from reading your minutes, people have come in at times and expressed concerns about the borough and the prevalence of rental units in the borough. But I would point out that, developers and others respond to market conditions. Not everybody can necessarily afford a home. We have a much more mobile society than we once did. And there are young people, others, people at the beginning of their working life and people at the end of their working life who don't necessarily want or can't own property. And the marketplace does call out or demand opportunities for people who do want to rent and need to rent. Bringing new people into the community, whether they're owners or renters, does help keep communities and boroughs in particular vibrant and moving forward. And we do believe the plans that we submitted are appropriate. They're very attractive garden-style apartments, and there is certainly a market demand for them. And I think it's a good thing that people want to move into this community, and some of them can't necessarily afford a single-family residence. So we would ask the council to be sensitive to the fact that not all people who rent are bad. Not all people who try to build residential housing for people who want to rent are not bad, and it can be definitely a positive to the community. We are working our plan through your process. We think that you will ultimately like it. We think that it will be good for the community. And again, we were fortunate that we were able to get in before any zoning change would impact all the engineering and all the planning that we had done. But there are a lot of property owners in the borough who are not going to be that fortunate, and I think it is very hard to have the rules of the game change on you under those circumstances. So just wanted to make that point of record, and again, appreciate your service, your time, and your consideration as you go through this process.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else? Yes, come forward.
Okay. I'm Dr. Trent Nichols, and I'm in one of the places that's going to be zoned R1, and I'm very appreciative of this. But I just recently had an experience, 721 Ash Drive, Hanover, PA, Trent Nichols, MD. And I just happened to have an experience with actually the elementary Washington school principal who was telling me, and actually my significant other now, I'm a widower, is also in a very interesting program that she's in Reisterstown, and they have the same problem occur there because of the increase in children. And here's the problem. He said he actually has 23 openings for new teachers at Washington Elementary, okay? And that's because there's lots of kids now that have moved into these areas. Now, something not everybody realizes that teachers are really getting scarce. And this is a real problem, because if we don't have educated children to grow up and to take various positions, we're in big trouble. And right now they have 23 openings. Out of the 23, he had something like 30 people apply, of which only half of them could even spell correctly. The same thing happened at the Reisterstown Middle School. They had 40 openings. A lot of people left their area, and they have a lot of multi-home, apartments, condos. And I think the problem which nobody is really addressing is the educational property, that the more single homes you have, the more income it brings in. The cheaper homes that you have, the more children, because as you just mentioned. And this is something that isn't being addressed because, guess what? We haven't increased the salaries of the teachers. And it's really hard to get them. So I think what you've done, I know what the attorney said, but of course, he's educated, so am I. I'm actually an MD with Research Institute. And I've been at least 3 different universities. I've been around the United States. I was a military officer, and I value education above everything. And education is the main thing that's helped the United States stay where we are. And we need to understand that if you have too many apartments and too many kids, it's really going to be hard to find qualified teachers to take those positions.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, sir. Come forward.
My name is Kenneth Wright, W-R-I-G-H-T, 15 West Hanover Street. I thank you for your time and consideration. Just a little bit about myself and my family. I've lived in Hanover for 20 years. I got married when I lived here. My kids were born while I've been living here. I've definitely sunk my roots into this community, and I feel it is one of the best decisions I've ever made for my personal life. I'm currently on the board of the Hanover's Historical Society. I volunteer heavily with the school system, as does my wife. We are the type to jump in when needed, many times sacrificing our family time for such endeavors in hopes to make the world a better place, as well as teaching our children civic responsibility. I would like to see this town continue to thrive and be a place people want to raise a family. To that end, I am here today to offer my support of all the proposed zoning changes before you. The prior zoning left some holes that have been manipulated by members of this community and non-members of this community for personal gain, as well as contributing to population density problems. It appears that the proposed zoning is addressing these issues, along with many others that I was not even aware of. As with many things involving people, I will be speaking on the items that hit closest to home for me. The issues in question for me revolve around potential population density concerns. Due to the nature of the property tax structure, population density not only impacts traffic and crime rates, it also impacts quality of the school system. It is the subject that I would like to concentrate my comments on. The Hanover Borough school system is currently educating my 3 children. My wife and I are heavily involved with the school system through volunteering, fundraising, and even being officers on parent organizations. In my opinion, Hanover has an incredible education program that is doing a wonderful job educating any of the children that choose to use it to its fullest potential. We have been impressed with all the aspects of our schools and would like to see this continue in the future. Under the prior zoning, there were many areas where a developer or even a single landlord could drive the population density up. Increasing the population density on a lot puts added burden on the school's budget, as they have to take additional students without an equivalent increase in budget, which is the property taxes. To qualify this with numbers, our current instructional cost per student is $8,800 per year. We have a current 16-to-1 student-to-teacher ratio, which falls in line with national averages. If the population density increases, the ratio would change and impact the quality of the education the students have available to them. A specific example of this has happened in my neighborhood recently. A single-family home was bought by an investor. The original house was split into 2 units, and then an additional duplex was built in the backyard of the property. This all on a .24-acre lot. If we assume 1 child per unit, we have increased the school students from 1 to 4 on that property without an increase in tax. The tax revenue for the subject property is approximately $3,500 per year. There are 2 other properties in close proximity that don't have children, so if we take that tax revenue from those properties, add it to the subject property, we come up with a total of approximately $8,700 in school tax. This would have covered the assumed 1 child for the original property. Now we have a possible 4 children on that property, which creates a deficit of $26,400 for the additional students. This causes us to look further out for additional tax revenue, and if another investor were to come in, we start running out of properties to reinforce the revenue. This has the effect of decreasing the money per child or the student-to-teacher ratio. Either way, it is a reduction of the quality of the education in our schools. From what I've witnessed, we have at least 4 students residing in those units at this time, so my scenario has gone from theoretical to reality. All of this impacts our community in a negative way. Poorly educated citizens and poor reputation for the school system that drives people away. I personally don't see how an increase in population density ends well for this community. The proposed changes that jumped out to me that address these density concerns are as follows. Limiting how many residential buildings are allowed on one lot in mixed-use areas, section 140-303, subsection B. Adjustments to the zoning maps, changing from some areas from R5 to R1 or R5 to R3. Increasing the requirements for civic space and traditional residential developments, section 140-441C, 6 through 8. Adding section 140-446, defining requirements for conversion of existing dwellings. I would like to reiterate my support for these zoning revisions and hope that they will pass as proposed for the betterment of this community. I'd like to close by thanking Mr. Maines, the Planning Commission, and anyone else who has put in the hard work to revise these zoning regulations. I feel these changes will go a long way to continue to make this a wonderful community to raise a family. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Is there anyone else? All right, at this time I'll close the public testimony portion of the hearing. And have we received any written comments for the record?
We received a letter from Mr. Mark Kaufman at 745 Spruce Drive. I do notice that there is a Mark Kaufman that is participating via Zoom. And if it's the same Mark Kaufman, I'd invite him to indicate whether or not he has any public comment in addition to his letter.
Hi, this is Mark Kaufman. Sorry I could not make it because I was out of town for a business meeting, but as long as the letter was made public, to the Borough Council and shared with them, I'm fine with that.
Mr. Kaufman, and it will be made available to council.
Thank you.
Are there any others?
No, that's
Okay. So we will conclude both the public comment as well as the written comment reception. Moving towards the conclusion here, it looks like I'm announcing that the presentation of Exhibit A will be made at the council meeting directly following this meeting this evening.
Well, if I can make some comments on it.
You can.
now. So I passed out a revised property list, which will become Exhibit A to the proposed ordinance. Essentially, the differences are, as noted before, as to the 7 properties that were misidentified as in terms of their changed zoning district, they have been corrected. And as to the 15 properties that were listed that had no zoning changes, those were omitted. So those are the changes to the property list. We will take this up during your business meeting.
Okay. At this time, I would request a motion to recess the current hearing until October 26, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. at this Hanover Borough Building, 44 Frederick Street, Hanover, PA, pursuant to public notice, mailed notice, and e-notice, if applicable, pursuant to 609 of the MPC. So moved.
Bill, before you go any further, you asked if council had any questions, and I do. Okay? Two quick questions.
Of course.
I tried to get
Have fun.
answers today, but I don't know if I got a call back or not because I was in and out. One is, and this is directed to Eric, okay? The accessory dwelling unit, I know exactly what you have specified in regards to it. But what has come up just recently is that several of the townships have been experiencing garages that are attached to the houses. I'm only giving this to you now, okay? But I did pass it over. And children are moving home now due to the tight inflation. So they're actually using the garages for bedrooms. So I think that under accessory dwelling unit, you might want to sort of clarify that a little different, because you won't have that availability otherwise. And then the other question that I had that I did not understand was what you call bulk requirements. What is that?
Bulk requirements is just a general term that covers all of your setbacks, your lot area coverage, your heights. It's all the sort of dimensional things that are associated with a lot, that you as an owner know how tall you can build your house, how big you can build your house, how big your lot can be, or how small your lot can be. We just categorize them all under the title of bulk criteria.
Would the average person sitting here tonight know what you meant by bulk requirements? Or could there be a specification set out to give a description to this?
I'd prefer
Because
to
I had
leave
no
it-
idea.
I'd prefer to leave it as it is because that is industry standard for that language. So I'd like to stay with what the zoning is.
No, stay with it, but explain it. Have an explanation.
I'll take a look at it and see if
Would
there's
you
clarification.
please? Thank you. That's it. That's it.
Okay, so I reiterate my second.
I have a motion and a second to recess the meeting until, I stated before, October 26th, et cetera. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We stand in recess. Briefly announcing, we are piggybacking this with the monthly council meeting. Let's take about a 5-minute break and try and start that at about 7:10. Those of you who are staying over, we've got 5 minutes.
3 minutes.
My distinct pleasure to call to order the September 28, 2022 meeting of your Hanover Borough Council officially to order, and request that we all stand and recite in unison our wonderful Pledge of Allegiance, and we're going to follow that with a brief moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. With the able assistance of Secretary Felix, let's call the roll.
Mr. Fuentes?
Here.
Mrs. Funk?
Here.
Mrs. Greenholt?
Here.
Mr. Greenholt?
Here.
Mr. Hegberg?
Here.
Mr. Kress?
Here.
Mr. Locker?
Here.
Mr. Reichart?
Here.
Mr. Rowland?
Here.
Dr. Rupp?
Here.
Solicitor Schultes?
Here.
Administrator Hill?
She is here.
Mayor Whitman?
Here.
Secretary Felix, we have a quorum.
Thank you. At this time, I will open it up for in-room public comment. Anyone in the room would like to say something for council's benefit? This time, I will close the in-room portion of the public comment and open this up online if there's anyone who would like to speak.
If you're joining us via Zoom, you can unmute yourself if you'd like to address council.
No one? All right, we will close that portion of the public comment portion as well. At this time, your chair requests the motion for the consent agenda items as printed before you.
So moved. Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda is approved. Turning the page to page 2, we will ask Vice President Rowland to ask a few things for finance.
Okay. Item 1, consideration of a motion to approve a revised 2023 personnel organizational structure, including permanent assignment of a director-level oversight of the Department of Water Resources to the Director of Planning and Engineering, permanent assignment of the supervisor position for the water meter and inflow and infiltration I&I divisions, hiring a utilities business manager in lieu of a director of water resources, and backfilling the currently vacant assistant director of public works position. May I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of the consideration signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay.
No.
I have one on this side
Yes.
I think
and
we had 2.
one on this side. Yes.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Somebody slap Barb, will you?
What?
Somebody slap Rupp, will you?
I say no every now and
Okay,
Back to
item
you,
number
Roland.
2, consideration of a motion to approve the voluntary retirement incentive program for eligible employees. So motion, with a second?
May I make an alternative motion to table that until we have further opportunity to, for Amy to work on it? On how we do that correctly.
I'll need a second.
I
I'll
second
need a
that.
second to, now I want to be clear, Brian, second to table.
Yes.
Second
Barb's
table?
motion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All in favor of tabling signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is tabled.
Okay. Item 3, consideration of a motion to direct the Civil Service Commission to create an eligibility list for the police department hires from Metro York Police Testing Consortium, my PTC testing list.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Item 4, consideration of a motion to direct the Civil Service Commission to participate in joint civil service testing with Penn Township to create an eligibility list for fire department hires.
So motion.
All in favor signify with an aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Rowland. Let's move into governance and policy. Dr. Rupp.
Thank you, President Reichart. I would ask for consideration of a motion to approve the bid procurement contracts and purchasing policy and procedures.
So moved.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed?
That
Motion
concludes
carries.
my report.
Thank you. We'll move to planning and engineering. Counselor Hagberg.
Thank you. Consideration of a motion to award the bid for the engineering services for the Doss Alley Improvement Project to low bidder ARRO Consulting Incorporated in the amount of $54,000. Borough responsibility for the total project will be $22,000.
Second.
Any discussion? Calling the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Consideration of a motion to receive the work produced for the subdivision and land development ordinance saldo from the Hanover Borough Planning Commission, authorize solicitor and staff to submit the documents to York County Planning Commission for review, and to prepare and authorize the advertisement of the proposed amended version for public hearing.
Second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Consideration of a motion to approve the revision to proposed zoning ordinance amendment, or ordinance number 2330, changing Exhibit A to the property list of all properties affected by the proposed change to the official zoning map.
So motion.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Consideration of a motion to schedule another public hearing pursuant to public notice, mailed notice, and electronic notice, if applicable, on the proposed zoning ordinance amendment, ordinance number 2330, for October 26, 2022, at 6:30 p.m. at the Hanover Borough Building, 44 Frederick Street, Hanover, PA 17331, in accordance with Section 609 of the MPC.
So motion.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
That concludes my report.
Motion carries.
Go. Oh, I didn't.
You got
Dang, it
it.
is long.
Go to the next
Like
page.
to turn the page
Come
over.
on.
No.
No, no.
Here's a little, I have to talk to Eric about this. Consideration of a motion to authorize the re-advertisement of the notice of proposed enactment in accordance with Section 610 of the MPC, setting forth all of the provisions in a reasonable detail, together with a summary of the proposed changes to the zoning ordinance amendment ordinance number 2330, to be considered for enactment October 26, 2022 at 7 p.m. at the Hanover Borough Building, 44 Frederick Street, Hanover, PA 17331.
Second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Consideration of a motion to authorize the borough solicitor to enter the borough's appearance in the zoning hearing scheduled on the application of J.A. Myers Building and Development Incorporated for a special exception to develop a 120-unit garden apartment court on property located at Cherry Tree Court.
So
Second.
motion.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Now it concludes my.
Thank you, Counselor Hegberg. Public Works and Facilities, Counselor Kress.
Consideration of a motion to approve the award of the bid for Guthrie Memorial Library roof replacement project to Midstate Roofing and Coating, Inc., low bidder, in the amount of a total base bid of $964,000.
Second.
Second, yeah.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, sir. Mr. Hegberg, have you had a chance to recover your voice? You're up again.
I'm telling you. All right, consideration of a motion to approve the recommendation of the Economic Development Committee to change their name to the Hanover Enhancement Committee to add 3 citizen advisors to the committee and to change the focus of the committee to collectively identify and advance community enhancement opportunities that will meaningfully improve the quality of life and enjoyment through the creation of a vibrant, beautiful, and sustainable community.
Second.
Go for it.
It's been moved and enhanced with a second.
Right.
Double it.
All in favor,
Behave,
signify
Bill,
by
behave.
saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? You
You're
have
getting
your
razzed there, Joe.
enhancement.
I do have a question.
I just chair it, I don't.
How are we gonna go about
That's the logo?
getting these people? How are we gonna go about getting these people? Just gonna advertise on Facebook, or how are we gonna get these people?
Merchandiser.
I liked it till we changed the name, but I'm out now.
I mean, you always have to have a little job description to know what they're gonna do.
Well, that is a good
Will the
point.
committee
That's
develop
probably the
that?
next phase for us to figure it out.
Oh, well, the
Define
committee will figure that out.
Yeah.
All right, good.
Repurpose the mission statement.
Okay,
Change the font.
yeah, we'll figure it out.
Alrighty, I guess we're moving into public safety. Counselor Lockhart.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Sure.
Request consideration of a motion to approve the advertisement of the proposed ordinance for regulation of fireworks in the Borough of Hanover.
All in favor of the consideration signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, sir. We will segue into the mayor's report. Is there a report this evening, Mayor?
Of course.
Okay.
Good evening. This is my report for August of 2022. August 2nd, Trail Towns feasibility study was discussed with the YCEA and Trail Towns Committee, and we are proceeding forward to continue to advance the Trail Towns project. August 4th, Amy Hill and I met with Stephen Martinez of the York County SPCA. Mr. Martinez explained the plethora of programs offered at reduced rates that are available to our borough residents. We plan to do some informational programs in the future to bring awareness to what all is available, as our residents are underutilizing these services. And the good news is they are not raising our fee this year. So, August 12th, I swore in the Hanover Public School crossing guards, and Chief Martin reviewed safety measures and protocols for both crossing guards and students. August 25th, the York County Economic Alliance and Valerie Myers of the Hanover Borough held a meeting and tour of the Hanover Market House to inform us about the proposed studies on the infrastructure and administrative workings of the market. Looking forward to the recommendations on how to grow and revitalize our beloved community asset. Thank you to Moon's Cafe for the delicious lunch. And throughout the month, I had communications with borough residents concerning the fireworks ordinance, noise ordinance, zoning issues, etc. And I wrote a blurb about Hanover past and present for our new Hanover map coming out soon. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mayor. I see our
happened to the
fire chief.
registration?
Chief, is there a fire commission report?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it short because our meeting was a bit long the other night. So overall, after being at the public safety meeting and talking to those representatives, there is a little bit of confusion on or misunderstanding or not knowing what the commission is. So I want to give a report every month on what we're up to. Next month, we'll give a more in-depth report with a presentation ahead of time, so you have something that you can actually look at and then have an opportunity to ask questions and whatnot. So on the financial end, right now, our P&L is running in the positive. We're about 10% ahead of expected revenue and about 2% under budget. So I'm very happy about that. Last year, this time, that was not the case. We were kind of scared. If you remember, I came back to council and asked for the possibility of extra money, which we did not need. So, right now, the Personnel Committee is on track to move myself and our executive assistant over from borough employees to the Fire Commission, to be employees of the Fire Commission. Just waiting on a few things to come through insurance-wise on that for cost. The civil service test that you just approved is because we gave a test last year, and I hired one person off that list for Penn Township. The other people failed either in the background or, they all failed in the background, I'm sorry. So the last person that I offered the position to took another job in another county, and then the next person failed his background, part of his background, and so we're out of people. And I got one more position to hire for in Penn Township. Penn Township authorized a 16th firefighter to help take the burden off the overtime cost. So some upcoming events that we're doing.
Do we have, how many does the Hanover Borough have? Penn has 16, how many do we have?
15. Prior to when I started, it was 16, and they never filled one of the positions from many years ago. So, upcoming events for the fire department, obviously, we were at Kids Kingdom in Penn Township last weekend. We've got fire prevention kicking off on Saturday, October the 8th. That'll be at Lowe's. We'll have a display out there. We'll be participating in trick or treat like we always do, so you'll see some fire apparatus coming through the town handing out candy and whatnot. We will be also attending the Hanover High School homecoming bonfire. We do that every year as well. And again, then we'll be at the Halloween parade, providing lighting and fire police and some logistical support with radios and whatnot. Our EMS division had 452 calls in the month of August. Those calls have been trending upwards. 256 of those calls were in the borough, as opposed to 196 in Penn Township. So, again, like I said, we are trending upwards, and because of that, right now we're missing about 25 to 30 calls a month because we don't have units available. So we have a threshold of about 50 where we decided that we're going to start looking towards the commission to say, we need to consider putting that third truck back in service. We removed that from service a year or so ago, or 2 years ago, because of the cost and the low call revenue, or call volume, I'm sorry.
Chief, when you say we're missing calls?
So we right now have 2 staffed ALS ambulances. So there's an EMT and a paramedic on each one. One's at Work Park Station, Station 1, and one's at the Clover Lane Station, Station 2. So if we get a call comes in downtown, the one from downtown goes. Then we get another call in, the one from Clover Lane goes. Third call comes in, it goes to either Saves or Pleasant Hill. Those are the calls we're missing because we're getting multiple calls back to back.
Oh, someone is responding, it's just not us.
Yes, it's just not us.
It scared me,
So,
yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
So, yeah.
Tony, do we reimburse them if they make calls from outside of Hanover itself? Or is it a mutual giving and taking?
We have a billing agreement with Says and with Pleasant Hill and Spring Grove that if we provide service to them, they will joint bill with us.
Thank you.
However, our club members, our subscription service, doesn't cover outside agencies, the same as if we go into Conowauga Township and pick up a person that's a member of Saves, it doesn't cover their membership. Or we're not covered under their membership, so. Any other questions on that? Okay. Emergency Management made a presentation at Public Safety for both municipalities. Mr. Walton's our Regional EMA Director, and one of the things that he's been focusing on is better public safety at events like the Halloween Parade, Snacktown Street Fair, that sort of thing. Chili cook-off. Snacktown Brewfest coming up, but for those that are in the public on the roadway where we shut down roads, if a vehicle was coming down Carlisle Street during Dutch Days or Hanover Street Fair, there's a big barrel with an arrow that points down Chestnut Street. If that person has a medical emergency, what's going to stop that person from plowing into all those people? That barrel's not. So what Jeff has been working on is looking for ways to develop donations, if you will, or come up with a cost of what it was gonna cost to get the barriers that we fill with water. I forget exactly how much they weigh when they're full, but we have the ability to pin them together, so they're 6 foot long. When you pin 3 of those together, that's a pretty substantial barrier to go through. It won't stop everything, but it will stop those maybe have a medical emergency. If somebody really wants to get through, they'll find something to drive through.
We don't have those concrete Jersey barriers or something in Public Works we could lay out there with a front end loader?
I'm sure that there's probably a few, but there's a whole, not near what we would need to do that. And that opens up another whole host of issues when you set them. You set them, you gotta have somebody there to move them in case of an emergency, so.
Well, the same with the water-filled ones.
We can pull the plug out, dump it. We would have to put tablets in, dechlorinator tablets, so that we don't run into problems with the MS4. Not a big deal.
Stormwater issues, chief.
Yeah, so we'll pull the plug and make sure they get,
Look
that
the other way.
That way Councilman Hegberg doesn't have to worry about any issues there. So, our volunteer organizations, if you remember, years ago, we had Eagle Fire Company number 2 and Clearview Fire Company number 3 and Hanover Fire Company number 1, and Hanover Fire Company number 1 went away a number of years ago. And Penn Township had 3 fire stations and an ambulance, and they lost one of their fire stations. But the Penn Fire Station and the ambulance all went together a number of years back and created Penn Township Volunteer Emergency Services. So 2 years ago, our volunteers merged with them to create Hanover Area Volunteer Fire and Rescue. So now we've got one volunteer organization. And we've taken the relief money that Hanover Borough gets and Penn Township gets, and that goes to the Relief Association under that organization. And what the Relief Association is, every under, I just had it in my head, I forgot it. There's an act under Title 35 that directs any insurance, out-of-state insurance, any policies that are written by out-of-state companies. A portion of that, 2%, goes into a kitty in the Commonwealth. And then each year that money gets divided up. So between the 2 municipalities this year, we received about $121,000, the Relief Association did. Now that money, there's limits to what that money can be spent on, and that's managed by a different group of officers than what are the volunteers. But just as a reference, they replaced all of our SCBA's, our breathing apparatus this year, and a bunch of other things to the tune of $310,000 that we, as the Fire Commission, didn't have to come and put on the municipal budgets. So, the rest of this is all a discussion that occurred with the solicitor, between our solicitor and the solicitor for York Area United Fire and Rescue, which was discussing how we should be moving forward as a commission, because we're not really doing what we're supposed to do. We're still relying too much on the municipalities, and everything needs to come to the commission. I don't want to get into the weeds on that, because your solicitor has not been briefed on any of that yet. I just sent Amy the emails for those solicitors today that were there, so I don't think it would be appropriate for me to start to talk before Solicitor Schultes has a chance to be briefed. So, with that said, is there any other any questions for me for the Fire
I do
Commission?
have a question. What's happening to the station on George Street?
Oh.
Looks like they're breaking it up or something.
So, a month or so ago, we had a call, and the operator of the engine pulled out of the station, and unbeknownst to him, there was a compartment door open. It hinges on the top and it flips up, and it took out the wall. So the masons were there today, finishing up. We hope to have the garage door reinstalled Tuesday, but it's been quite a ordeal. Some questions were raised on our disciplinary policies as a result of that accident, which again was addressed at the Fire Commission meeting with this, about how that should be done, because we've got one disciplinary policy, but then we've got 2 municipalities that have different ideas on what those policies should be, so it needs to come in under the Fire Commission.
Does our insurance cover that, or?
It was not turned into the borough insurance, it was all under the Fire Commission, because
Or does somebody's
yeah,
insurance?
yeah, the borough, the Work Park Station and Clearview Station were turned over to the Fire Commission. The Clover Lane Station is still owned by Penn Township, and we pay a monthly lease, which equates to the mortgage payment because they had to assume the mortgage from the former volunteer fire company, who could not make the payments anymore. So hopefully we'll get that mess cleaned up out there, but
Thank you.
that far. But anything else?
President Reichart, what is happening with the study?
With the
Study that was commissioned with us?
The study is, Amy has been working and contacting them. I believe they have been targeting October, apparently all along. Amy, late October, but how strongly do we feel that's accurate?
I mean, I haven't seen their work project yet or their
Right.
progress yet, but I'm hoping to have something by the end of October.
I can tell you my part was done with with their consultant on the operational side. That's been done about a week ago.
Oh, really?
I believe, yeah.
Okay.
He submitted the final report, because, about 2 weeks ago, he called me for few questions to tie up loose ends, but,
Right.
so, it'll be interesting to read his report.
Very much so. So that's what council's been waiting on to review, to be able to begin these discussions. So, anything else for Chief before we let it go?
No, I don't, you've answered all of my questions. You did good tonight.
Congratulations.
Well, look at that, that's a,
Better get out of there quick.
I had two more, and you just answered them, so I didn't have to ask it.
May have more later. Okay, I guess that moves us into other matters. Anyone have any?
Bill,
you
on
have another
other
matter?
matters,
Okay.
Amy, how far have we gotten with what we brought up about the additional coverage for insurance, as far as liability and everything for council?
Ask about what happened to the
You were
registration.
getting a second quote or something, weren't you?
Jim Shelton and I met with our insurance broker.
Yeah.
And talked about our renewal rates for 2023. They don't like to quote us until 60 days prior to when the policy would become effective.
How many
So
days?
60 days.
50?
60.
60 days, okay, sorry.
60 days. I know, I'm in the corner over here. So by November 1st, we should know what the renewal rates will be for the liability coverage. But we did ask him to quote us at a higher liability amount, just to give us an idea of what that additional cost would be.
Okay, thank you, Amy.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Anything else under other?
I do have a question.
Question.
At our workshop meeting, I thought we voted to bring the rental registration and inspection to the Borough Council for a final vote. I thought the vote was 5-4 in favor of that. I just wondered what happened to it.
I have no knowledge of what happened to it.
I can address that.
Okay.
Oh, you took it off.
What we had to do is change the ordinance and insert a future date for the enactment of the inspection piece, and I have to figure out how to do that.
Oh, so it has to come back.
Yeah, I have to write
Makes it
that
legal.
into it and then bring it back to council.
Thank you.
Yep. Couldn't do it between last week and
That's
this
okay.
week.
Not to put you on the spot, but next month or two? Okay.
Yeah, I think at your October meeting.
Anybody else? Other? Alrighty, last chance for public comment. Anyone in the room? Think of anything you didn't ask or say the first time? Seeing none, is there anyone online with their hand up, waving?
If you're joining us via Zoom, you can unmute yourself if you'd like to address council.
Talkative bunch.
Nothing? We will close public comment. Before adjournment, I will call your attention to the printed agenda, has the October pertinent committee meeting dates and involvements, and I will formally request a motion to adjourn.
So the question for council is, we're going to adjourn to executive session. Do you want to come back into this session afterwards or not? Because if we adjourn now, the meeting is adjourned. If we just go into executive session and there's something to address afterwards, we can take that up tonight.
So it might be prudent to stay in session until the
Gives us
conclusion
the
of the
option.
executive session.
It does.
Okay. So I would ask you to withdraw your motion to adjourn
So moved.
and your second to adjourn, and simply state that we will be going into a brief executive session, and we'll return to conclude the meeting after. So I'll have to ask all of you to exit to the hallway. Chief, man.
Okay, so we're back in session. It's 9:05. Council adjourned to an executive session pursuant to 708A1 to discuss matters involving the employment and appointment of a potential public employee or officer.
That being said, at this time, I will request a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
There are 9 seconds, sir. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You're adjourned. See you next month.